Okay, so the goal here is we're going to try to just understand the intuition for why fiscal policy would affect the macroeconomy. So what's the basic idea, and how do each of these different mechanisms the government has available, either spending or taxes, how do those work to achieve the policy objectives of the government? And so we're going to start with expansionary fiscal policy. So remember, the goal here ultimately is to increase labor demand. That's what the government's trying to do, right? I want to increase labor demand, increase employment, increase real GDP. So we're using this in a recession, much like what we have going on right now. Currently, the government has been using expansionary policy. And so what that implies is that they would increase government spending. So the government is going to buy more stuff. And so that has potentially several different effects, right? So the government buys more stuff. And so obviously that directly is going to increase labor demand. So if you take an example, and let's say that the government decides, okay, we're going to build a new building on campus at UW Oshkosh, right? So it could be the state, could be the federal government, whoever it is. We'll say that it's the federal government that said, okay, we're gonna help out the economy in the Oshkosh area. We're going to build a new building. So obviously that's going to increase demand for labor among construction companies, right? So all of a sudden now we have a new $10 billion building project, and local companies have to hire workers in order to make that production happen. So the government is just directly increasing labor demand in that sense when they buy more stuff. There's also another effect, which we'll kind of come back to. We talk about a multiplier effect, which is that this increase in spending implies increases in incomes, right? So all of a sudden the construction workers make more, which increases consumption of other stuff. So we'll kind of come back to that multiplier example, but it cycles through and potentially has a greater impact than the initial increase in spending. But the main idea there, pretty simple. Government spends, buys more stuff. That's going to increase labor demand. Taxes, the government is going to decrease taxes. And the idea there of decreasing taxes, how is that going to affect labor demand, is to basically, you've got two kind of options here. So you've got on the consumer side, right? So as the workers, the decrease in taxes is going to hopefully cause us to spend more. And so if we start buying more stuff, so I start doing some home improvement projects, or I'm buying more clothes and cars and other things as a result of a tax rebate or a decrease in my tax rate, which causes me to take home more money in each paycheck, that will hopefully cause us to spend more, increases demand for goods and services, which would cause firms to hire more people. Labor demand is going to increase. That's the idea on the consumer side, is really a spending type of argument, which is similar to an increase in government spending in that respect. It's just happening directly with consumers as opposed to directly with the government. The other part of this is on the firm side, is that a change in taxes. So I could either decrease tax rates for firms, how much they pay for each worker, or give them tax rebates, whatever the case is. The goal is to sort of reduce the cost of hiring for firms and to therefore increase the demand for labor. So decrease the cost of labor for firms, which should increase our demand for labor. So pretty straightforward. It should be relatively intuitive, right, what the government is trying to accomplish. And we're just making it a little bit more formal by saying the goal of these things is to increase our demand for labor. So if I draw that diagram, so what's the whole point here? So labor supply. And here we would be in a recession. So here's labor demand. Let's say we have that fixed wage rate. It's downwardly rigid. And so we're at L1. And we want to get closer to what I'll call L star. So we've got this big gap. So we've got this unemployment here. Right, is higher than what it should be. So we've got all these people that want to work at this wage but can't because there's not enough demand for labor. And so the government says, well, we can increase spending or decrease taxes in hopes of increasing the demand for labor. So that's an increase in spending and or a decrease in taxes. And by doing that, we're going to increase employment. And notice we can reduce the amount of unemployment that we have in the economy. So that's the government's objective right now and what it was doing. And they were pretty explicit about it in this case with the coronavirus stimulus, that they're giving consumers money, giving firms money in the hope of increasing demand for labor to reduce the unemployment rate. Now, the current situation is a little different because in a lot of cases, more production can't actually happen. Right, so if parts of the economy are being told don't go to work, don't produce, even though firms are hiring more people, they can't necessarily produce. But the hope is that then once things open up, real GDP will be higher than what it would have been because firms are still employing these workers. But at any rate, that's the basic idea of fiscal policy: increase labor demand. It looks exactly the same as monetary policy. Expansionary monetary policy. It's just the way that we've achieved it is different. We've increased spending and or decreased taxes.